Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project Season 13, Episode 4. And what I've got in store for you is an episode. It's a podcast for sure. Thanks for being here. Good to see you figuratively, since I am not spying on you in this moment. Or am. Thank you for being here. I took a break last week, and I did kind of want to talk about that just because I think it might be helpful as I'm figuring out this video podcast workflow, and I know other people are trying to do the same thing, and I think that, figuring it out might be helpful for other people. So last week was just super, super busy. Tons of different things, like all kinds of stuff, all the things happening, and, it's like, obviously, I want to record the podcast, want to do that. We're getting kind of down to the end of the week. I haven't had time to outline it, haven't had time to plan it. So I'm thinking, okay, I can do it over the weekend. But I'm just kind of exhausted. And so I just thought, instead of doing that, I'll just not. I'll just not do one. I'll just take a break. Because something I've been trying to do lately, not that this is a hard and fast rule, and it's definitely a gray area because that's something that happens when your like hobby and your interest becomes your job, is what is work and what is play. Like, I don't know. But something that really, really kind of is something I've been trying to work on is not like producing stuff on the weekends, just because if I do that, then I can go months and months and months without actually taking a break. And so sometimes, on the weekends, I might want to like tinker around with something or play with something. But as far as actually like sitting down and producing a full-on video for like a main channel video kind of thing, trying to save that for the weekdays and have a bit of a break. Again, if I have some like idea that I'm just super excited about, that I don't want to wait till Monday or something, we'll break that rule from time to time. It's something I've been trying to do, and I decided last week, well, you know what? Why don't you continue to do that? It's going to be better in the long run for everybody. Continue to give yourself time to rest and recover, and then just do an episode next week. And a thing when I was doing the audio only version of this show is it was a lot easier to sort of like squeeze that in unplanned, not just on a weekend, but even on a weekday in between things or at the end of the day or whatever. And the thing about the video podcast, even though I feel like I've narrowed down the workflow about as streamlined as it can possibly be, and I'm quite happy with it, it still requires, what it really requires is a lot of planning. There's way, way more planning and prep that goes into this version than the audio version, and which I'm totally fine with. I think that's great because it makes the show better overall. But it takes obviously more time. And then there is more work afterwards, since it's not just an audio file, but there's a video file. You're uploading to multiple places. There's thumbnail. There's all the YouTube stuff. So the workflow, even in its most streamlined state, is still more and still bigger than the audio only version. And so what that means is, in situations like last week where time is just a very finite resource, it's just one of those things that had to not be done. So hopefully you understand that. But I thought that it was interesting to share, so it's not just like, I didn't feel like it, I didn't want to, but kind of the reasoning behind that, especially if you're somebody who's producing your own show, whether it's audio and video only, or especially if you're someone like me who is, maybe switching from audio to video and you're still sort of figuring out that workflow. So anyway, that was sort of what happened last week and what's been going on. And before we go any further, I would like to talk about our mic of the week. So the microphone I'm using this week, again, if you don't remember, my plan, if I can execute this and find a way to execute this, is to use a different microphone on every episode. That is very easy because that's something I do anyway. So all 10 episodes of this season, we'll have 10 different microphones. And then at the end, in the season finale episode or somehow afterwards, I'll play clips from all of them, and you can tell me which one you like the best. I don't know. It's just for fun. So this one right now, kind of like I just mentioned, just showed, this is the Earthworks ETHOS, and it's running through the Rodecaster Duo just on the generic condenser setting. If I turn that off, this is the microphone's default sound. Very flat, very neutral, not unlike the SM7B, even though this is a condenser mic and not a dynamic mic like the SM7B. So that's kind of a good place that the Ethos fits in, is if you're somebody who you really like the SM7B, but you would prefer, what happened? Something sounds strange over there. If you like the SM7B, but you would prefer what is going on? Sorry, something weird is happening here. I'm gonna pause that for a second. Okay, I think we're back. So I was getting some weird sounds after I turned off the processing and on the processing, and I realized I just installed a new beta firmware into my Rodecaster yesterday. And clearly, it does not like it if you turn processing on or off. I don't know if that was just in my headphones or you heard it, but the mic was suddenly cutting to like a weird, like all the mids were gone, and then they were back, and then they were gone, they were back. I don't know. I just reset the processing. Everything sounds normal now. I'm not going to turn that on and off again on stream because I learned my lesson. I forgot I was running beta firmware, and I'm also I'm using the Rodecaster video for my video, and I also installed beta firmware in that yesterday. So you beta believe there could be issues, although I'm not doing anything crazy with that, so I don't think that's going to cause any problems. As I was saying, the thing about the Ethos is if you like the SM7B, but you want a condenser microphone for whatever reason, you prefer condenser microphones, they work better with your interface, better with your mixer because they require less gain and all that kind of stuff, this could be a really, really good option. It's just one of my all-time favorite microphones. I love it so much. The only thing that's a bummer for me personally is the windscreens are a very specific size that come with it, and I can't get any of my colorful Reporter Store windscreens on here. Sometimes you can like drape an SM7B windscreen, but it's a little too big. That's that's nitpicky. These things are just, they're so well made. They're so nice. When this microphone was originally released several years ago, it had an MSRP of like $750 or something like that, $800, something like that. And then after, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, they cut it down to $399. So it's at the exact same price point as the SM7B, which really seemed to be pretty clear what they were targeting with this. And I love this mic. Like I said, it's an end address condenser microphone, something we're going to be re-talking about later in this episode. But it's great. The thing I love about this microphone, and this is maybe just my opinion, or it could be unique just with my voice in this environment, whatever, is that this is the least fatiguing microphone I think I own pretty much. So in terms of like, tons of mics can sound good. Tons of mics sound good for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. When you're talking about something that's 1.5, 2 hours or more, this is the microphone that I feel like is the least fatiguing. Like your ears don't get tired. It doesn't get uncomfortable to listen to. Not that all my other microphones do, but certain things, like certain microphones that are maybe a little more harsh sounding or a little too bassy or whatever it might be, just naturally, they can really start to fatigue your ears after a while. And this one just sounds smooth and it's a very good mic. I've noticed them becoming more and more popular, which makes me really happy. And I really hope that they continue to be popular because I feel like it's a really good one. So the Earthworks the Earthworks ecosystem includes the Earthworks Ethos, and that's the microphone that I'm using right now. Now, before we dive into the main topic for today, there is something I want to go back into last week's episode a little bit, last week's topic, or I guess not last week's, because there wasn't an episode last week, but the previous episode where I talked about the cons of being a pro. And there's a few things that I just wanted to sort of address that popped up in comments and popped up in discussion and messages and stuff. So things that I want to like expand on, and also things that I want to clarify. Something that was really cool about that topic is that it seemed like it resonated with people, which made me feel good because I was a little bit nervous about sharing it. It felt like I could verge on being maybe a little bit too critical, and I didn't want things to be taken out of context. And it's one of those things, like I have this feeling and I have this thought, but am I just a crazy person over here on an island by myself and nobody else has any idea what I'm talking about? Fortunately, that wasn't the case. Lots of other people sent me messages that they felt the same, both from the creator and the consumer side of things. So I had other creators let me know that they felt like, yes, I've also dealt with this. I'm I share a video on something and someone comes in and tells me how long they've worked in X industry and that they, all the reasons I'm wrong for what I'm doing. And then people all on the consumer side of things also saying like, yeah, I feel like when I have a question, I don't understand something, I'm either talked down to or the explanation I get is way too complicated for me to understand. And I just feel kind of dumb because I don't understand it. So it seemed to resonate both, with creators and consumers as well. And that's really cool. But the thing I really did want to clarify, because it was, if you didn't listen to that episode, what I sort of talked about was people who are professionals in industries finding content like the content I make, which is often geared towards either beginners or prosumers, consumers, prosumers. So that's where a lot of it's focused, and sort of looking at that with that industry standard, industry professional eye, and being hypercritical in a way that maybe is like uncalled for, or not even uncalled for, but also just unhelpful and sometimes just inappropriate. Like why I'm working on a video, or I wrapped up a video about, I think I told you last time, the mystery mic. Someone sent like a no-name wireless mic from Amazon. It's almost like a copy of the Hollyland Lark, and it's just a no-name brand. So I did like a video of like, what is this mic and how does it sound? And that's the kind of thing, like, obviously that's not geared towards professional use, right? Like a microphone like that is not at all geared towards professional use. But that's the kind of thing I'll make a video on and have people say like, oh, you could never use this for like real, projects or whatever. And it's like, you shouldn't. That's not what it's for. Like, it is a $30 to $40 wireless microphone. Keep expectations in line with that. And if you look at it with those expectations, with realistic expectations, then it actually is quite good. So something though that I wanted to clarify, that was kind of the gist of the episode last week, but something that I wanted to make sure was still clear is that professionals are good. And I have a lot of respect and admiration for professionals in every field. Like that's to the experience, the knowledge, the skill set to become a professional at something is really good. And I'm not in any way saying I don't want to be like the anti-professional person. I would like to be professional at what I do. I would like to, be considered a professional content creator. But I actually had a revelation, believe it or not, at a hockey game last week where I was thinking about this, and that's why I wanted to add this addendum here. So our local hockey team is an AHL team, an American Hockey League team, and that's one level below the NHL. So the NHL is, the main hockey league. I know it's the National Hockey League, so it's North America, well, Canada and the US, but it's the biggest hockey league in the world. Right below that is the AHL. Every NHL team has an AHL affiliate team that feeds into them. So it's supposed to be like a development team. That's where they can draft players into. They can build up their skill sets, move them into the NHL team. If someone in the main team gets injured, they can pull people up, all that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty cool system. Our NHL team is the Seattle Kraken, and then our AHL team are the Firebirds, and they go back and forth. The Kraken they've done a few strange things. So we don't need to turn this into a sports podcast. It's been a crazy week. Prior to this week, they're not having the best season. But there's a player they had, it's only their fourth season. So the Kraken is the newest NHL team. It's only their fourth season. There was a player there for their first two seasons who was, like a great player, like not like a superstar or anything, but like a very solid NHL player, did lots of good stuff, scored lots of things, helped the team establish. And I don't know if he was traded away or they just didn't renew his contract or whatever going into the third season, but he went somewhere else. Okay, that's fine. This season, the fourth season, in the middle of the season, they did this trade and got him back, which I thought was interesting. I was like, I didn't really know. I'm relatively new to following sports this closely. I didn't know players could leave a team and come back to that same team. Seems like it could potentially be awkward, but maybe it's like, cool, yeah, we realized we had this person who was really good and we gave them away and we want them back. And they traded for a couple other people. And then they did something. This was the strange part, is the person they traded, the person who left and came back had been in the NHL, like only the NHL since 2017, 2016, something like that. So for a long time. And, because sometimes players will be in the AHL, they go up to the NHL, they kind of go back and forth. And then there's the players who are only in one or only in the other. It's just kind of the way their careers work out. He's been an NHL player for many, many seasons, many years now. and they took him and they assigned him to the AHL team, even though like there didn't really seem to be a reason other than that they seemed to prefer some of the other players that they traded for, and which is whatever. It's a little strange that you go out of your way to bring someone back and then like kind of get rid of it, because assigning them down to the AHL the way they did is basically like, you're going to stay there for the rest of the season and then we're not going to renew your contract, is kind of the message. Obviously, he's probably not too happy about that, even though it's strange because it's like the AHL team. That's our team. That's the team we root for, the team we cheer for, the team we're excited about. But I understand that players, most players' aspirations are to go to that highest level. And if you've been at that level and you come back to the second highest level, you're going to feel a way. And it's been interesting because he did a press conference like after so first he got sent down. They played a game and he immediately like scored 2 goals and like got multiple assists and stuff. Which just like, even with the really good players, because a lot of AHL players have NHL experience, like they're all incredibly good athletes, incredibly good hockey players. He was just performing in a way that like didn't look like anybody else on the ice. It was just so, it reminded me of like when one of like the coaches or something drops into like one of the learn to play classes that I take, where it's like, oh, you can just control the game. It was kind of like that feeling. And then in the press conference afterwards, he was like, yeah, my goal is to prove that I don't belong here. And he was like, it's been, like the fan reception has been nice. I appreciate that. I don't think I belong here and I want to be back in the NHL. And I like that honesty of like, yeah, it's a public demotion in a way, and it seems pretty unfair, and it's cool that you are okay admitting that. But what he also said was, he was like, this team has a lot of young people on it. I remember what it was like to be a young player, so while I'm here, I want to be a good role model and a good mentor for them. And I thought that was pretty cool, but it also sounds like just a nice thing to say. Maybe especially if you said something that sounds a little angry. But then in several games since, especially because we get to go, we have season tickets, so we go and watch the players, and our seats kind of face the player benches so you can see them. And I just like keep watching him because I keep wondering how do you do your job in this situation? And I've noticed like when they're on the bench, a lot of players are sitting watching the game. He constantly has like, they have an iPad that I think you can, review plays and do all that kind of stuff. And he's constantly has that with somebody else. So it's usually one of the younger players. A lot of players who are drafted to the AHL are really young. So like, 19, 20 years old. They haven't gotten to the NHL yet or whatever. And he's like constantly reviewing things with them, talking about, I've just sort of seen like, and he'll kind of go person by person and do that. And you can sort of see that he has leveled up the performance of the whole team, which I think is very fascinating. And I've seen multiple times where he will sit with a younger player. They'll be reviewing something on the iPad on the bench. That player will get off the bench, go on the ice, and then immediately like get a goal or assist in a goal. And it's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but clearly, like in terms of mentoring and being a good role model, you're doing it. At the game a couple days ago that I was at, I was watching him. They were like kind of trying to set up this play, and I could really see he was like trying to get in position and trying to make this one shot like several times, and they kept setting up until eventually it did happen. But I could see like he was not in any way giving less than 100%. Like you could tell he was putting everything he had into this, even though it's a mid-season minor league hockey game, right? And you're a spurned major league hockey player. Like you had every reason to maybe not give it your all, and your contract's the same. You're gonna get paid the same either way, so it's like you could just kind of coast in the minor leagues, get your same paycheck, and then leave to another team next season. But he wasn't doing that, and the thought that popped into my head was, I saw that, and I literally just without even thinking of it thought like, wow, what a professional. And because that's, that is an uncomfortable situation, a tough situation, not to mention just the logistics of like you randomly had to move and meet a whole bunch of new people and then, play, perform with them publicly. Like it's probably not an easy thing to do. And this the thought of like, wow, what a professional. And then I was like, wait, what makes me appreciate that more than the professionals who sometimes show up in the comments section. And I realized that there is a difference, and the biggest difference is being professional versus proclaiming yourself a professional. And I think it's kind of that thing, like a leader doesn't have to say they're a leader, right? Like if you have to tell people that you're in charge and you're the leader, you're probably not a great leader, and maybe you aren't actually the person in charge. So being professional, being the person that has the skill set, has the experience, and implements those and utilizes those and stuff, that's a thing you can do without having to label yourself anything. And that is very different than proclaiming yourself a professional, which is the person who will show up in the YouTube comments of a video about a thing that's clearly not geared for you and then have to list out your entire resume and why that person is wrong, why that thing's a piece of junk, why anyone who uses it doesn't understand what they're doing. And that's, there can be two sides. You can have someone who is a professional who does that, but that's, to me, that knocks down your professional credibility a little bit. So I think there's a huge difference. And to me, that was very illuminating to kind of have that thought, the difference between being a professional and proclaiming yourself a professional. And I think part of that is, recognizing and remembering that, and we're going to talk about this actually a little bit later today in the listener messages section, but, professionals obviously are huge resources of knowledge and resources of skills, right? Like if you need a medical procedure, you want a professional doctor. You don't want someone who has a hobby interest in medicine. Like you want a professional doctor. If you need to hire a plumber to fix a huge leak in your house, you want a professional with that skill set. The difference is, I guess that's sort of the difference. Like let's use the plumbing example. Say you have a leak in your house. You try to fix it. It doesn't work. You call the plumber and they come in and say, okay, this is what it is. This is the problem. This is how much it's going to cost. Here we go. Boom. They fix it. They do a great job and they leave. That's very different than them coming in and going like, oh, did you install this faucet? Was this from Home Depot or did you try to get something on sale? Like this is a piece of junk. You're an idiot for installing it. Now let me do it the right way. See, this is the right way here. Here's your, inflated bill. That's like you could still be, you could have that professional skill set, but that's not really professional. That's not actually professional behavior. And yeah, so I think like when someone is a true professional, they know how to either use their skill set, they know how to just utilize their skill set and their knowledge and their resource and experience in a professional way. And when it comes to sharing it, relaying it with others, they know how to do it either with a light touch or, when asked, and how to do it humbly when asked. It's not the thing of like, hey, you're a pro at this. I need help with it. How do you do blah, blah, blah. And then just overload someone with jargon. So it sounds like the retro encabulator video, like just complete, insanity that makes no sense that nobody can understand. And then you kind of look down on them for not understanding very specific lingo. You know how to relate to them, how to help them, how to share your knowledge with them, share your skills with them, and then that kind of betters and empowers everybody. That is what I think is the mark of a true professional. So getting into today's topic, which I am so proud of this title, Bye Bye Bias, Getting Opinions in Sync, which I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, if you remember in sync, that would make sense. And I still think that's very, very clever. So something I wanted to talk about today is something that pops up a lot for me in the world of being a content creator, especially someone who focuses a lot on gear and products and stuff like that. And I feel like lots of other people can relate, but it also pops up kind of anywhere online a lot. And that is the idea, that is the concept of bias and how that plays into what you do and how you do it. This is something, having a bias and not being objective is something I get accused of regularly. And we'll talk about that because I think that's a very interesting thing to explore, and something that maybe a lot of assumptions are made by a lot of people about a lot of people, and a lot of the times it's not necessarily super accurate. So we're going to talk about what bias is, and the thing that this is something. So I'm going to share a YouTube comment, and I do want to be clear that when I share YouTube comments here, it's not like you got one negative comment and needed to make a podcast episode about it. I got a comment the other day that is the type of comment I get very often. And so it was like, okay, let me unpack this. I think this is a worthwhile discussion. And I like using YouTube comments because they are posted publicly. If someone sends me a direct message or an email, even if I block out their name or whatever, obviously that wasn't sent that wasn't sent to be public. That was sent privately. So I just sort of feel like YouTube comments are an easy thing to share because they are posted publicly voluntarily by the person that did them. So this popped up in my feed the other day. This was on a video about the Zoom PodTrack P4 recorder. So it's a little portable podcast recorder. And it says, keep in mind he's road biased, yet it was hard for him to knock something a third of the price with a better mic and headphone preamps. Everything that's an issue is not really. Keep in mind you can connect the device to a PC, and then I'd assume you're doing some real neat stuff if you're next to a PC. Just plug this baby, set it up, and you're good to go. The pod is about what goes on the convo, not the casters being used. Some of the best podcasts out there had no good gear at all to start. So this is sort of, that is all one sentence with no punk. Yeah. This is actually overwhelmingly kind of like a positive, kind of like an upbeat message, which is the gear doesn't matter. You don't need the best gear. This video, I was comparing the PodTrack P4 with the original Rodecaster Pro because that was what was out at the time. The P4 has an MSRP of like usually under $200, sometimes like $160, $170. The Rodecaster, the original one, $600, $700, and the Rodecaster Pro 2 a little more expensive than that. And his thing here is basically what he's saying is, at least at the start, is he's saying that this guy is biased. He can't recognize that the Zoom is better because it's so much cheaper and has better preamps. The Zoom is not better than even the original Rodecaster. It is not. Like, that's not a bias thing. That's just a fact. It's also, like he was saying, a third the price. So I would not expect it to be better. And that was kind of the point of the video. It wasn't me making fun of this recorder. It was me saying this thing's awesome. And if you need a small portable podcast recorder, even to this day, that's still like one of the best options out there. It's way easier to put that in a bag and do portable podcasting than it is to, try to pack up a Rodecaster, a full-on Rodecaster and stuff. So tons of advantages to it. It's a great deal for the price, a huge value for the price. And those are all advantages. It does not have the EQ. It does not have the processing. It does not have the overall quality. It does not have the interface. Like, it also has a lot of things that come up short, even with the original Rodecaster, much less than, the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Duo or anything like that. But those are significantly more expensive. And that's kind of how the video is framed. It's like, if you just need a podcast recorder, podcast mixer, and you have the budget or budget's not an issue, get a Rodecaster because it's going to give you the best results. If you are on a budget or you need something portable, and you need kind of the most bang for your buck, the P4 is absolutely a good choice. And that's kind of where I was going with this. Now, this is the kind of comment too, where like the rest of it is kind of cool, where it's like, I like that he's like, if this plugs into a computer, if you're doing a computer, you're probably doing cool stuff. Like, let your show go where it go. Like, I actually like the message of this. But it's the road bias thing where it's like, he's accusing me of being biased in favor of road, not recognizing that what he's really upset about in that first thing is that my bias doesn't align with his bias, which obviously he's biased towards the Zoom recorder. If I had said, the Zoom recorder is great, get that over the Rodecaster anytime, this comment wouldn't say, keep in mind he's road biased, but he's still recommending this. He wouldn't mention the road bias. It's only because I disagree that, like, oh, you're biased. It's like that, like, it's rigged against me because I disagree with you. But I also want to go on, the reason that I really want to kind of like touch on this, and why I think this is just a good example. I like this because it's a relatively polite comment, but it still brings up the idea of a bias, which gets brought up anytime I talk about anything. It doesn't matter. Especially, it happens a lot with Rode because I'm talking a lot about Rode stuff, and I'm a big fan of Rode. But pretty much anything, Sony cameras, Apple computers, Elgato stuff, whatever. You're biased. Which I would like to talk about. What does it mean to be biased, and is it a bad thing? Do you need to not be biased? So literally copy and paste the definition from the dictionary of bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way to be considered unfair. So the unfair part, I mean, I guess that could play into it. That's the part that would make a bias negative, is the fact that it's unfair. But a lot of times, especially in the world of YouTube, when we're talking about, that creator's bias, that reviewer's bias, I think what they're talking about is that person has preferences. And preferences are a thing that everybody has. So whether you're talking about a preference or whether you're talking about a bias, everyone has lots of preferences. Everyone has lots of biases. It's not always a bad thing. It's also called just having a personality and being a person. So what we really need to get into then is the idea of being objective versus subjective. And this is where I think there is a lot of, there are a lot of assumptions in the world of YouTube. I think, and this, it's hard to navigate because it's such a big, broad platform and there's a lot of everything on there. So objective versus subjective, I think, is more of like journalism versus opinion. So if you go to something like the Consumer Reports YouTube channel and you watch, they review everything from cars to washing machines to computers and phones, like, everything. You would kind of expect them to be objective. You would expect them to have a journalistic approach. Like, this is the thing, this is what it is, this is how we rank it. Okay, maybe this is how it compares to other things. You would maybe also expect them to have, if you're talking about one type of thing, maybe they also cover a lot of other things in that category. That is a more journalistic approach, ideally, right? You're objective, you're fair, you're looking at the whole scope. Subjective is personal opinion. If you go to someone's channel and they say, hey, I just bought this new computer and I'm going to do a review on it, you're probably not going to get necessarily the most objective thing in the world because it's something the person already bought. So clearly they already had preferences. They already probably ruled out other things. They chose that for specific reasons. Even if there's things they don't necessarily like about it, they probably still would prefer the thing they chose to buy over other things. And, and there's the inherent thing of like, they want to feel good about the thing that they bought. So they might not want to tell other people like, I bought this thing and it sucks. I mean, sometimes that's why you make videos, right? Is you just get really mad about wasting money on something. But in that case, the person also probably never claimed to be objective. They never claimed to be a journalist. They never claimed to take that approach. It's kind of just assumed. And especially in a world where you can go to something like a Consumer Reports channel where it's supposed to be objective journalism. And then the next thing up in your recommended is just like person's personal review on a thing. And as the viewer, if you're not being aware, if you're not being conscious and, critical of what you're watching and how you're watching it, it's easy to just lump everything together and be like, oh, well, a review should be objective. Not necessarily at all. And I think the key here especially for, creators or channels is to figure out what your approach is and to just be very clear about that approach. Are you somebody who does objective reviews? Are you someone who does subjective reviews? I don't know that I've ever claimed to be objective when it comes to reviews. I like things that I like, and that's specifically why sometimes people say, hey, why don't you have a video on this? Because I'm not interested in it. If I were trying to be as objective as possible, I would review every microphone that comes out. I would review every camera lens, every streaming thing, every Elgato prompter competitor, every Stream Deck knockoff, every capture card, all the things. Every time one comes out, I would review it and then try to rank it. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the stuff that I find fun and interesting. So right off the bat, like, that's not objective. That's my approach has never been an objective approach. But sometimes if that's what people are expecting, and then they see someone who has a preference, yeah. So the thing about objectivity is it does set a standard. So it's difficult to be objective in one case and subjective in another, unless you're very, very, very clear, like stating it. And I'm saying all this for anyone who also is a content creator. I think this is helpful for anyone who just consumes anything. You're watching YouTube, you're watching reviews, whatever, kind of how they're, you can analyze how they're approached. But also if you're a creator yourself, objectivity sets a standard. If you are known for being objective and then suddenly you throw in a subjective video, that is going to throw people off and that's going to stand out in a weird way. So, being super clear about that's very important. Maybe that's every video. Like, this is an objective review, or even this is a subjective review. Like, this is all my opinion. I'm totally like, I love this. I'm not even interested in competing products because I'm just really excited about this. And, and that opens up a whole other cans of worms, because obviously on YouTube, you can only be subjective about something. You can only like something if the company pays you. You can't just like a thing because you happen to like a thing. No, that's impossible. Bigger thing though, And especially for creators, you do not have to be objective. You do not have to be objective. All you need to be is transparent. So if you have a preference, if you're not being objective, just let people know, hey, I'm reviewing the Rodecaster Pro 2. I freaking love this thing. It is my favorite. Okay, cool. Now I don't really expect you to recommend other products over it, but you can still tell me how other products compare. You can tell me what you like about it. Maybe I just want to know more about that, and those biases, having preferences, having biases, I think can actually be a really good thing because that is what gives you a personality. It kind of goes back to that thing from several episodes ago where we talked about people sort of just reading spec sheets in reviews. And it's like, then every review is the same, because it's just, you're just a different person reading the spec sheet versus somebody's actual insight, someone's opinion, someone's use cases, even if they're not necessarily covering every feature, every capability of something. And that is where having your biases, having your preferences makes you stand out, right? I have all these guitars back here, right? I don't have a Gibson guitar on this wall. I do not like Gibson guitars. It doesn't mean I would never, okay, that's a perfect example, actually. It doesn't mean I would never play a Gibson. Like, there are beautiful Les Pauls out there. There's some super cool flying Vs, give me like a Thunderbird bass. It's pretty sweet. But they're not my thing. I really typically don't like the style. I don't like the feel. I don't like the price. Like, there's just things that just aren't for me when it comes to Gibson guitars. I love me some Fenders, though, and just the colors and the designs and the styles, really love that. And there's people who are totally flipped. The people who would never want to touch a Fender and have a wall full of Gibsons. It's just personal preference. And it's sometimes arbitrary and just super subjective. But, like, there's nothing wrong with that either. And sometimes, if say someone runs a YouTube channel where they talk about Apple products a lot, and they talk about the computers and the phones and tablets and all that stuff, and then suddenly they throw in a Windows laptop review or something, it could be fun to see, like, Apple user tries Windows or whatever. Like, okay, yeah, tell me what you think from that perspective. But if you're trying to suddenly, like, be this objective thing, like, I don't need you to be that. If you're someone who I know is enthusiastic about Apple products and something new just came out, I kind of want your opinion on it, right? Like, I want to know the person who likes this stuff. Sometimes the people who like stuff are the people who are most critical about it because they have the strongest opinions about it and they're the most familiar with it. So I just want to know your opinion as the enthusiast. I don't necessarily need you to then also tell me what an entirely different ecosystem of products does, because that's not what you need to do unless that's something you really want to do. So as long as you're transparent about that, as long as you let people know what, if you are trying to be objective, let people know that. If you're being subjective, let people know that. If you have your preferences, let people know that. And that doesn't have to be a serious disclaimer at the start of the video. It can literally be like, I love this thing. It's awesome. It's my favorite. I don't even care about, competing products. That's definitely part of it. And for me, this is something that plays into it, that does definitely make things very subjective, is I have a very hard time in life separating the art from the artist. Look at Michael Jackson, right? I feel weird listening to his songs. I used to love The Cosby Show. I don't want to watch that anymore. Like House of Cards, great show, a couple of seasons. Not going to rewatch that one, which is so, like, I can't separate the art from the artist. And so there is a thing out there where, bad companies can make good products. And when I say a bad company, maybe a company that, whatever, they're unethical, they treat their employees poorly, they have bad manufacturing, they can make good products. And good companies that treat people well and do things nice and try to, be the best they can be, can also make bad products. And something that I do take into, and that can be a problem when you're reviewing products, right? Because sometimes you want to look at, here's product A, B, and C. And you just want to look at those in a vacuum. This would be the objective approach. Look at those in a vacuum and go, this is how A works, B works, C works. Okay, B seems to be the best. Seems to be the best of this group. And that would just be an objective look. You're not taking anything else into consideration. I can't do that. I always look at where things have been, where they're going, the stuff behind the scenes. When I see a company that cranks out a product that just seems to be a cheap knockoff of something another company already did and spent a lot of time researching and developing, I'm already not that interested in the product, even if it is like just as good as the original and more affordable, because it's like you just knocked off what someone else already did. And the person who did it first probably has a bit more passion about it. Even in this case, person I'm talking about, a huge company or something like that. So, Rode is a good example. Let's talk about the Rode bias. Over the years, like I started using Rode products. I don't know when I bought my first one, 15 years ago, let's say, way before having a YouTube channel. Then I had my own personal Rode products that I bought. I stocked, multiple digital media programs with Rode products, and I didn't even realize I had a lot. It literally wasn't until I started my YouTube channel, I started reviewing stuff that I just had. Here's a microphone, here's a boom arm, here's whatever. And I was like, oh, it just keeps being Rode things, because they were just kind of at that intersection of like performance, quality, reliability. They're just good products. Over the years, I've gotten to know people from Rode, and I've talked to them, and they've obviously sent out gear and stuff like that. And I have an appreciation for how they do things. I've been critical of them in the past for products and releases and approaches and all kinds of stuff. But the reason I'm critical for them is because I want them to succeed, because I like them so much. And I also then acknowledge when I think they do things right and they get things back on track. And what I've learned from at least the people I've met on their team is they really care. Like, they are passionate about, enthusiastic about the thing that they're making and the products that they make and the way they design it, and they genuinely care. Like, I've talked to people in high level positions at Rode about very small, minute details in products, and they're really like, if they think there could potentially be an issue or something, they take it so seriously, and because they really care. And so for me, even if sometimes things are imperfect, or, here's a beta firmware update that has a bug in it or whatever, like, who cares? I like, that's, to me, that's totally fine, because I trust the people behind the scenes want to do the best they possibly can and really care. And to me, that means a lot more than the opposite, I guess, happening. And for me, it's hard to separate that. And I can even go, let's go in the other direction. Let's go with DJI, is a company that I have totally shifted my opinions on in the past few years, where, prior to doing YouTube or whatever, I was into drones. If you want a drone, you buy a DJI drone, right? Then getting into YouTube, especially, we'll say from 2018 to 2021-ish, especially, DJI, their products have always been great. Like, I always have thought their products are great. It was really their marketing and their approach that irked me. It just felt like it was very, everything and everyone kind of looked a certain way. And I had some behind the scenes accounts from other creators and other people that were, maybe treated in ways that I didn't agree with. And I just sort of stopped using DJI products. I never cover them on my channel, just sort of like put them out there. Well, about a year ago, someone from DJI reached out and was like, hey, we're interested in, working with you on something to do with the Mic 2, their wireless mic thing. And I full on, like, we had a video call, and my whole thing was just a notes doc of like, here's everything. Like, if I have said this stuff on podcasts and I've said this in videos, I'm going to say this to you, the person from the company, right now. And they went through point by point and addressed, and they were like, like, we understand we come from this, that, and the other thing. And they were like, I think if you go and you kind of look at our approach for the past couple of years, just sort of see that we've shifted. And I did. I went and I looked at their websites, their marketing campaigns, the creators they include in launches, how they approach product launches. And I genuinely saw they had shifted and they had changed things, and things felt a little more open, a little less high pressure sales, a little more inclusive. They kind of like remedied a lot that was bothering me. And talking to the person I was talking to, and, the people from the company, I could see that that really bothered them, and they really cared about not doing those things anymore and improving and being better. And it was like, wow, okay. So then I ended up, yeah, sure, let's do something with the Mic 2. And now the Mic 2 is like my favorite wireless thing, because it's, it's nice. And that's cool, because now, like I said, DJI products have always been great. Now I don't have a weird feeling like when I pull out my drone to fly it, or I want to use the Mic 2, I don't kind of have like or the Osmo Pocket 3. I can actually be excited about these, because I feel like, at least by and large, the company behind them is trying to do good things. And obviously we're talking about a huge corporation here, so there's probably good people in that corporation and bad people, just like anything. But in general, it's like, they moved into a positive direction. Now I feel better about the products. My preferences and my bias have changed and have leaned and have evolved over time, and I think that's totally okay. And that goes for, that goes for kind of anything. And I think that at least that's for me, is that I have biases and preferences, not just for products, but a lot of it is tied to where I think something came from and why I think it exists. Is it just a money grab? Is it because, like, people are excited about it, and or the people behind it actually care about the thing that they're making? And that stuff is all just incredibly important to me. And I think just going back, that's why it's going back to this and just reminding you that they're just two different approaches. If you want to be objective, if you want to be subjective, not one isn't better than the other. They're just different. And all that you need to do is be transparent about what you're doing. But I do think the reason I really wanted to cover this was to sort of explain that and highlight that, because I feel like sometimes a lot of people, especially when I get criticized for being biased, it's people who come into any YouTube video, any YouTube review, and expect that this is an objective journalist piece. I'm not a journalist. I don't claim to be. I never said that I was objective. Like, I never, you are putting assumptions and expectations on me that I never put in place. And obviously people are going to do that. I can't control that. But I think it's important to just recognize that, especially from the creator side of things, and especially because that is a criticism that you might find yourself getting often if you are somebody who has a strong preference for something, and to know that you do not have to be objective. As long as you're transparent, you're open and honest about it, you don't have to do that. It's not a bad thing. It can also be just as helpful and just as relevant and just as important as being objective could be. So let's move in. Let's do a little channel check-in. With all that in mind, let me share with you some things I've been working on, what's happening. The song is lasting a lot longer than I expected it to. Still working out some kinks here. So this is a part of the podcast where, the main topic of the show is often very creator based. It's like, hey, this is, something relevant to being a creator. This is more just like, hey, this is what I've been working on. It's a little less depth, maybe. So stuff that I've been working on. If you remember last time, I was talking about trying to do a switcher review with the YOLObox Pro. I have solved my YOLObox review. It is finished. It is scheduled. It is ready to go. I have been doing reviews on video switchers. So obviously the Rodecaster video came out last fall, and I've been, doing videos on that. And then recently I did a video on the FeelWorld L4. I've also finished, although it's not published yet, a video on the Ulanzi DDO2. And those two switchers, doing those videos kind of prepped me for this, because those are very simple switchers. The YOLObox is a much more complex device. And I felt like, okay, I think I have that down in terms of like how to produce the video in a way that shows the capabilities of the device, but isn't something that's going to take me 6 years to edit and to film. And a big thing when using switchers is it's very easy to, think about it this way, I guess. Camera lenses. This is something I've noticed in the world of camera lenses is you will watch a lot of camera lens reviews, and you will see the person sitting in front of the camera holding the lens, talking about the lens, showing B-roll of the lens, but you don't see things filmed with the lens. And so a good lens review will show the lens. Like, most of the review will be shot through the lens. Not all of it can be, because if you need to show the lens, you need to use a different lens to film the lens, kind of thing. So I get that. But I feel like most of a lens review should be through that lens. Most of a microphone review, you should be hearing the microphone that you're reviewing. And if you're doing a video switcher, talking about what the video switcher can do is very different than having the video be created with the video switcher. So that's what I've been doing with all these switchers, is I've been just recording I've been setting up a multicam setup and basically producing the review on the fly with them. I don't want to add in fancy B-roll and cutout. I want to show you what you can do with these things and use them to actually make the review about them, so that every frame of the video is produced by the thing. That goes for all the switchers that I put together recently. So that's something I want to do with the YOLObox. I thought I had it all set up. Actually, I learned a lot about the YOLObox, but I really it was tricky because I had to redo it because I made a mistake, and you want to talk about a company that has people behind it who really care about the thing that they're making. That is YOLObox, YOLO Live. They genuinely like want this to be the best, and but they want you to have realistic expectations. And so it's kind of cool because I know that when I run into a problem or I have a question, I can email them and they explain it very clearly, really quickly, sometimes in even way more depth than I asked for, which is super nice. So the big thing here, aside from just how much this can do, if you don't know what the YOLO box is, it's a video switcher. It's a it looks like a touchscreen monitor, but you got 4 HDMI inputs. You also have 2 USB inputs. You have 3.5 millimeter audio, but inside of here is basically like Ecamm. So you can create scenes just like you can in the Rodecaster, but with more depth, more complexity. You can do like animated overlays. You can do instant replays. You can do crazy transitions. You can do scoreboard updates. You can do guests. You can live stream, bring in a guest. You can pop up comments to your stream. You can multi-stream. It's kind of crazy what you can do inside this thing, but obviously that means it's a pretty complicated device. You know, it can do a lot, so you have to learn it. There's a learning curve. And what's interesting, the thing that I learned, because I've been comparing the YOLO box and the Rodecaster Video as they're the 2 advanced mixers that you could potentially use them to create something that looks produced and professional and slick and has all the graphics without needing a computer, without needing other software. But they are different. And the YOLO box does have more features, but I don't want to say it's unreliable. It could be unreliable because once you dial in your workflow, it's very reliable, but there's a lot more potential for user error is probably the way to go. Whereas the Rodecaster Video is simpler, like doesn't have as many features as the YOLO box, but is very rock solid. And it's like they try to make it a little more foolproof, but that also means they're more conservative with the updates they put out to it. Anyway, now I'm just rehashing the review. So what happened was, one thing about the YOLO box, it addresses the biggest criticism of the Rodecaster Video and any video switcher is it has 4K capabilities, asterisk, but you know, it has big 4K things. You can choose 4K resolution, you can stream in 4K, you can record in 4K, kind of. And so that was something that I haven't been able to figure out, and so I had to go back and forth with the YOLO box to kind of fully understand this. And they took the exact opposite approach of Rode. So with the Rodecaster Video, basically what Rode said is Rodecaster Video it's very powerful. Like the internal processors that are in its computer, it's got like a full-on GPU, a full-on CPU in there. It's capable of handling 4K video. But when you have 4 4K sources that are then being run through scenes and transitions and effects and chroma key and all this stuff, then you could potentially have some reliability issues if people like take it to the max kind of thing. And with Rode, specifically what they said is like, we don't want the Rodecaster Video to like rarely drop frames. We want it to never drop frames. Like they want this to be capable of being in a professional setting. And so to do that, it needs to be rock solid reliable. And so the fact that even though, yeah, I could probably squeeze in some 4K things, and I honestly still as a user kind of hope that maybe they find a way to put in some limited 4K just to sort of answer that criticism and claim, even if it means certain things get limited or taken out or whatever, restricted while you're using 4K to keep it reliable, whatever it might be. I fully understand where they're coming from. YOLO takes the exact opposite approach, and they're like, this can do 4K, but it's limited and it could get a little weird. But if you want to do like one input source of 4K, that's kind of what this is for. You can plug in one 4K camera, streaming to one source, you're good to go. Maybe recording. I've never been able to actually get recordings to be 4K even when I select them because it has an SD card. They always end up at 1080. And basically the explanation for that is that yes, it's capable of 4K. I have gotten 4K signal, 4K output with one source, but as soon as you start having multiple sources, then because of the processing, it bumps everything down to 1080. So pretty much like 95% of the time or more, just depending on how you have this set up with the graphics that you're using, the inputs that you're using, you don't need to buy this if you're just using a single input. Like that is absolutely a waste. So you're probably always going to have more than one input, which means you're probably always going to not have 4K capabilities. And then the other thing, the problem I was having was I wanted to record in here. And so I had my 4 HDMIs and I had my 2 USB webcams, because it'll take any webcam you throw at it. So I had 6 input sources. I was recording to the SD card, and it just looked like there were some dropped frames. Like it was a little stuttery, like looked okay. If you were watching it as a live stream, you'd probably be like, yeah, this is fine. Look, it's a little stuttery maybe, but it's okay. But for a pre-recorded video, especially trying to show that something has capabilities, it wasn't working for me. And so I recorded the whole thing, and then it looked like that. And I was like, I can't use this. What do I do? And so I talked to YOLO, and basically what they said was like, yeah, you're using the 4 HDMI inputs and the 2 USB inputs. Each USB input takes 2.5 times the processing power as one of the HDMIs. And then you're trying to also record simultaneously. And they're like, that kind of maxes out the capabilities. So if you want to record internally, you'll need to probably remove the USBs and not use all 6 inputs at once while you're recording internally. Or the other thing, which I did, was I just kept my 6 inputs and then just streamed it to a private stream and then just downloaded the stream, because it streamed full 1080, super smooth, looks fantastic, no problem. It was just the internal recording was where things were getting weird. So it's like even that, streaming looked good, internal recording was a little funky. And that's basically what I learned with the YOLO box is every workflow is different. So what workflow you're using with it, what equipment you have running through it, what graphics you're using, that's going to tax it differently in terms of the CPU and the GPU and all that stuff. And so you need to get your setup set up, and then you need to test it and experiment it. And once you've got it where your setup is working well, it will keep working exactly like that. But every time you set up a different configuration, it might work a little differently because it's taking all these resources and it's trying to assign them in the most efficient way possible all the time. And so it's different than the Rodecaster, which is like, it only works this way, but also you're limited. Like you can't do a lot of that stuff because it's only ever going to work this way. So I don't think it's good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just 2 very different approaches. And it was something I had to learn. I had to refilm that very long review entirely. But now I'm really happy with it. And that was a cool thing because I learned a lot more. It's a thing I've used a lot, but trying to use it to make a review of it sort of put it through this second level of scrutiny. So I learned a lot. I have a different appreciation for it despite all of that. And that's sort of a thing there. Actually, is that not a thing? Yes, that's something we're going to talk about in a second. I was like, I put that in here, right? Yes, I did. That's something we're going to talk about right now, actually, as we kind of switch on past that. So I'm going to pause that there. Think about mistakes. Just think about mistakes. The Mr. Mike video that I talked about, that was something I worked on. That was super fun because that was basically it's a $40. It's kind of like the Hollyland Lark M2, but it's $40 and it only works with phones and tablets. It's a cool little thing, and it works okay. It's not the best sounding thing in the world. Like the Hollyland definitely sounds better. But again, looking at the person who probably doesn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a microphone and just wants to spend $40 to get a better mic with their phone, and you get 2 transmitters with it, I think it's very usable and it's going to give you better audio than your phone. That was really fun. Less for the product and more for the exploration of this stranger sent me this. What is it? How does it work? I feel like that's a video that could potentially be fun and interesting to someone who's not even interested in microphones, just for the journey and the exploration. At least that's what I hope. And in doing these streaming things, I have just gotten into the habit of anytime I use a switcher, I just kind of switch to 30 FPS because it just seems like all switchers tend to prefer it, even though most now are capable of handling 24 FPS. That's just where things just kind of, I just feel like I have so many fewer problems when I just put everything in 30. And especially editing back some footage that's not run through a switcher, but it's the full 4K footage, which I did for the mystery mic. I had everything in 30 FPS for the YOLO box, and I forgot to switch it, so it's just a 30 FPS video. But I was like, gosh, I kind of like this. I like it. It looks good in a way. I was like, that looks good in a way I haven't seen things looking good in a while. So that's pretty cool. I do want to talk about this mistake. This is maybe something I should have even saved for a separate episode, since we're going a little bit long here. We haven't gotten to user messages yet, but that's okay. There's something, this ties in very much to what I just said with the YOLO box, where I could be kind of critical, show some limitations, but be like, I really like this thing. And I think we live in a world where when it comes to reviews and content, if you have mild criticisms of something like, oh, this microphone doesn't accommodate my colored windscreens, like that's an okay criticism. But if you come up with actual limitations on something, that's where people are like, obviously it's a piece of garbage, right? Like it has to be either the best thing ever or a piece of garbage, nowhere in between. And I'm a big fan of like, no, you just need to understand your tool. The YOLO box has these limitations. That just means it's a complicated tool that you need to understand. Don't buy this to use later today. Like buy this to use next month and then spend the next few weeks learning how to use it and how it works. And then you're going to have a great experience. But the onus is on you to then, take that time to put in that understanding and do that stuff. So a couple weeks ago, I made a video about a simple podcast setup that was just using the Rode Interview Pro. So that microphone, I kind of talked about this on here too. It's a wireless microphone, but it also has built-in internal recording. And if you take two of those, or any number of those, you can go into any location, you can have them all recording. There's no handling noise, they sound great, and you can basically have mobile podcasting. And then you just mix all the audio files together, sync them up in editing, and there you go. That's pretty much it. In that video, I made a mistake that I intentionally left in and even addressed in the video. So to show that, Heather and I had gone to like the small little mountain town nearby for New Year's. And while we were there, I was like, oh, it'd be really fun to film part of the video there. So we were like kind of outside in the mountains because it's a place where you wouldn't normally think of making a podcast, right? Like, and that's what I wanted to show. Like, I didn't want to just be in here where, of course, it's a podcast place. I wanted to be somewhere where you wouldn't normally think of that. And so we're sitting outside, we're sitting next to each other kind of on like this picnic bench, and we're talking to the microphones. And basically what happened there was that was my mistake because we were too close together. The Interview Pro has an omnidirectional pickup pattern. So the microphone I'm using right now will pick up things pretty much directly in front of it. But if I go off to the side, my voice changes. With the Interview Pro, as long as you're just kind of around it in any direction, your voice doesn't really change. It picks up sound from all directions. And that really does. That's one of the reasons I chose it as an example for being a good podcast mic. Because if you're somebody who doesn't really know how to use a microphone that well, you don't have experience, like you're a guest on a show, you can hand that to someone, and it doesn't matter if they go far away from it, they go close to it, they move it around or whatever. Like the sound is going to stay the same. It really compensates for poor mic technique in a great way. And there's also no handling noise on it. So I was like, cool, that's awesome. The thing I didn't realize, Heather and I, we were like shoulder to shoulder, and you can see in the video, we're right next to each other. So in that case, I should have been like, we can actually use a simpler podcast setup, and I can put one of these microphones in between us and we're done. And it's going to sound great. Instead, we each had one. And so we had some mic bleed because they were too close and they were picking each other up. And so when I filmed that and I watched it back, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound right. That sounds weird. So I need to go through and edit this. And like, essentially I have Heather's audio track, my audio track, and I need to sort of like cut between them. So that way there's not the weird kind of mic bleed sound, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but that definitely goes against the like, hey, this is a simple podcast setup. And so I thought, I could redo this. Like we could redo this. We could explain it. Like we could either use one microphone close together, or we could just be further apart. As long as we're not in the reach of each microphone's pickup pattern, it would be fine. But I thought, if I made this mistake and I have a decent amount of experience with this stuff, I think other people might make this mistake too. And so what that means is maybe this would be a good chance to not only explain that, but even show a solution, because someone might have made that mistake and just feeling like, oh, my podcast is ruined is not the best way to feel. So what I did was there's a whole segment in that video where then I explain like, here's what I did. Heather and I are really close here. We should have used one microphone because we were sitting close together. There's some mic bleed. Here's how I'm editing around this. If you find yourself in that situation with any microphone or this one, here's how you can fix that. And, it's a couple minutes of the video where I talk about, here's some podcast editing techniques. Here's how to fix this issue. Here's how to do that. Cool. If you don't want to do this kind of editing, just make sure that your microphones are far apart, because then they won't pick up each other's sound. You won't have the mic bleed problem. So that's all that was in there. And I thought that was really helpful, and I still think it's really helpful. But where people got confused, and a comment that popped up a lot on that video was, this isn't simple. There's nothing simple about that. There's not, like, how could you say this is simple? This isn't a good workflow. And it's like, I think what people were confused by is that it was biased. It was my personal preference. Like, yeah, we could use different microphones that have different pickup patterns, but I don't prefer those because I know that they're not going to sound as good, because if you use a little lav mic that's positioned poorly, now you're going to have someone sounding muffled. If you use a microphone that's more directional but has more handling noise, now you're going to have all this weird rumbling, and then you're going to have to put it in a mic stand, and you're going to then get away from my whole point of the video, which was a simple mic setup. So rather than, again, I guess the point of the video, which I emphasize in the video, is it's simple. It's, you take these two microphones, or however many you want, and you hand them to people, and everyone talks into a microphone, and they don't need any mic experience, and you're going to get great sounding results. There are just certain instances to be aware of where if you don't want to do any editing afterwards, you need to be very aware of your positioning. That's all. Pretty simple. But I think because people are so used to the home shopping network style of things where everything is polished and everything is perfect and all mistakes are edited out, it was like almost confusing to see something that's like, oh yeah, here's a problem you could have, but this is still an awesome setup. Same thing with the YOLO box. Oh yeah, here's all these limitations and weird things, and I even had to redo my video. It's still awesome. Like, and that's, to me, that's the realistic experience, because rarely do you ever buy any product, any piece of gear that you get it and you open it and everything's just perfect. You know, like doves fly out of the box and your life is just better. Usually it's like, oh, wait, how do I use this? How does it work this way? Well, you kind of have to figure it out, right? That's the realistic thing. And that's what I wanted to show in that video. And I think it really threw people off because it wasn't just this very polished thing. And even last year, I did this video. It was an unedited, ended up being like 35 minutes, I think. And it was like my top 5 pieces of underrated gear. And so it was just me at my desk, one camera shot. Because it was unedited doesn't mean it was unplanned, not unlike this podcast. I had 5 pieces of gear. I knew what I was going to say about them. But I just said, like, here's a thing. I like this because this is what it does. Okay, here's another thing, blah, blah, blah. So it's just me talking about that. People loved that video. Like, it got such a positive response. It made me so happy because it was like, okay, I don't always need tons of B-roll. I don't always need fancy editing, flashy editing. Sometimes I just need to communicate the thing that's happening. And something that people did say they really liked in that video was a couple of times when I'm using things, it's not that the things don't work, but you see me like trying to, screw an adapter on something and it doesn't quite go right away, or like things don't work perfectly every time. And people commented that they liked that because that is realistic. That's what you can expect your experience to be like as the person, the user, right? And I love that people like that. So I thought that's why with this video, like, this is one of those times where don't edit it out, don't refilm it, don't make it look perfect. This is a problem, a mistake that people are realistically going to make. Instead of pretending like it doesn't exist and making someone feel bad when it happens to them, explain it so people know how to avoid it or fix it when it happens. And that to me was way, way, way more helpful. And especially, I really actually love that because in our current world where everything can even be like polished AI content that looks like way too hyper realistic and hyper perfect, I think realism really stands out. I think stumbling over your words, maybe leaving things a little less edited than normal, leaving in mistakes, explaining your mistakes, I think really does add that human touch that makes things stand out. And so in this case, this mistake is something that I am really happy about and really proud of. And if you're making stuff too, I wouldn't say let your stuff suffer in quality or be low quality, but don't be afraid to let your realistic human nature seep into it. Don't be afraid to include mistakes and then even explain how to fix those mistakes. Speaking of things that aren't a mistake, let's talk about Gear of the Week. I'm excited for this one because I haven't gotten a chance to talk about these yet. And I'm biased. So I want to talk about desktop monitors. So a while ago, I made a desk setup video where I was like, hey, here's my desk setup. This is what I'm using. And in that video, I was like, I don't really have good speakers. I sort of had this like Sony Bluetooth speaker that I've had forever. It was actually from multiple teaching positions ago. I think I got it in like 2013 or something, and it was so I could have a little speaker like on my desk in the classroom, but it was easy to like put away, because sometimes, especially when there's substitutes, you're not going to be there. You kind of need to take things away and lock things down. And that's the way public education is. So something like that. And that's what I've just been using forever. I've never had like a good pair of like monitors or anything. And I edit with headphones. So I don't really I don't want to have the editing room where you have the big speakers that are in like the perfect optimal position and do that. And I know that might be the technically correct way, the professional way to do it. It's not what I'm particularly interested in. So anyway, I made that video. I explained I don't have anything. I even asked for a lot of suggestions in the comments, and people gave me some suggestions I was kind of looking at. And then Mackie reached out and they were like, hey, would you like to try our 3.5-inch studio monitors? And I was like, sure. Yes, they sent them. But it was the typical ethics statement thing of like, if you like them, cool. If not, let us know. You don't have to make a video. You don't have to do anything. Obviously, from their end, it kind of makes sense, because if I like them and they're on my desk, next time I make a desk setup video, guess what's probably going to be in them is those. And what's really cool is they sent me white ones. They're usually black. That's pretty standard. I've been getting white equipment just to try to brighten things up more in here. See the white boom arm. And they have white ones. The white ones are only available at Guitar Center, though. So like a Guitar Center exclusive, just so you know. If you want the black ones, they're available anywhere else. But these are really cool because they're not huge. The speakers themselves are, I don't know the exact height. I would say 8 inches tall, maybe. They're 3.5-inch speakers. They sound awesome, but they have a ton of capabilities. I'm trying to look at I have the box over here. So what's really cool is you've got 1/4-inch inputs, you've got RCA inputs, you've got 3.5 millimeter inputs, and you've got Bluetooth. So I know it sounds like an ad. It's not. It's just why I really like these, because it covered all of the different things that I wanted in monitors. And they have it's basically a tone thing, a tone knob on the front, but it's labeled as like a work play thing. So if you want to use them as reference monitors, you can turn it to more to the work side, and you're going to get more of a neutral, accurate sound. But if you're just listening to music, watching videos, playing games, you can crank it to the other end, and it's going to give a way more less accurate, more processed sound, but maybe a more fun sound for stuff like that. So I kind of I was legitimately sort of torn, well, do I want something that's super accurate or something that just sounds good, sounds fun? This is kind of both. It's pretty neat. They even have a little speaker or a little switch where if it's on the desktop or on a shelf, you can switch it and it changes the way the speaker sounds based on where you have it positioned. It's pretty cool. And the MSRP is $130 for the set. So that's they're not the highest quality professional speakers. They're really nice and I love them and they suit my needs perfectly. I use them for listening to podcasts, listening to music. I don't edit on them. I don't have them positioned in a way that's good for that at all. But they're great. They sound awesome. They don't take up a lot of space. They look cool. They have tons of features. I really love these things. They have been nothing but a joy to use. Totally would spend the $130 on them. It was just nice that it was one of those things where it was I'm shopping for monitors and this company's like, hey, you want to try these monitors? Well, yeah, sure. Sure, I do. So they're awesome. So that is my gear spotlight of the week. Because I haven't had a chance to talk about these. I've had them for a couple months now, and they are absolutely awesome. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the box. I was like, with touch control, tone control. I misread. I was like, I guess you touched the knob. Anyway, I misread things. Let's move on now to wrap things up with listener messages. So we've got a voice message, and we've got a few comments to go through, and we're going to dive back in, like I said, a little bit more on that professional conversation. We're going to do that very professionally. Up first, though, I have a voice message from Hoop Nuke, which is a very fun name to say. And we're going to be talking about the Rode NT1 Signature Series.
Hello, Tom. I have a question, surprisingly, about microphones. I'm talking to you on the Rode NT1 Signature Series, and the question is about this exact microphone. I recently started a basketball channel called Hoop Nuke, where I just basically talk about the history of the game, basketball players, weird moments, stuff like that. And the problem is the audio quality is really good. People have been really liking the videos. I know, what a terrible problem to have. But it is a problem because while most of the video is B-roll clips and me just doing voiceover on top of those, sometimes I like to mix it up and have some A-roll in there when I'm on camera. And my problem is the Rode NT1 is just a damn big microphone. And while I love the way it sounds, I've been really thinking about buying a Lewitt 440 Pure because it's more compact, it takes up less space, I can wave my European arms around, and all of that. But the problem is, in every comparison video I saw between these two microphones, I really prefer the NT1. It's much more smoother, it's easier to listen to for long periods of time. So, how would you balance this if you could only have one condenser microphone? And I do this because I want to have consistent audio quality throughout all my videos. Which one would you go for? The one that sounds better or the one that's more practical to use on camera? How would you balance that out? Or do you have any recommendations for me to do that? So, yeah, thank you, Tom. If you include this in the episode, have fun.
Thanks so much for that message. If you want to leave a voice message just like that, you can go to himynameistom.com, scroll down, and click on the little leave a message for a podcast thing, and you can use whatever device you have. You can sound awesome. Like if you use the NT1 Signature Series, or if you just use your phone or whatever, you can do that. So this is a great question. I love the way that you phrased it. I also love the, like, if you include this, have fun. It was just, I like the message a lot. But I like the way you phrase it. Should I use the one that sounds the best or the one that's the most practical? And I have found myself in this situation making reviews and making videos where the DJI Mic 2 is a great example. That's not the best sounding wireless system. I think the Rode Wireless Pro sounds significantly better. The DJI is the most practical and fun to use. So it's actually the one I would recommend more because it's just, if you want to just get set up, running, it still sounds great. I recommend that one more, even though it's not the best sounding one. So sometimes, I know we're talking about microphones and you would think, well, you go with best sound all the time. A lot of it is like, what do you have to go through to get that good sound? So it's not always the default option. In this case, though, and I even put this in my notes here, I love both. You're talking about the Lewitt. The Lewitt 440 is a wonderful microphone. It's awesome. It is more compact than the NT1. So I have an NT1 right here, but if you've not seen it, the microphone itself, this is a shock mount. The microphone itself is a little condenser mic. And then you put it in the shock mount, and it does need the shock mount. You don't have to do it. Rode does make a mount called the RM2, which is a non-shock mount that will then like let you just clip the mic itself to a mic stand, and that does cause it to take up less space. I would only use that though if you know that you're never ever going to touch the surface that the microphone is on, because then it will pick up every bit of handling noise. Usually you need it in the shock mount, and it comes with it. So you already got the shock mount, you're good to go. This is already a pretty big setup, and it is a side address microphone, but what it also comes with, because it is prone to plosives, is a pop filter. So there's a pop filter that kind of screws in a little holder on the front. And then this is the setup. So this is kind of the setup we're talking about when we talk about something taking up space. It's big. Like this does take up a lot of space. If this were in front of me, if you're just doing voiceover, you're just doing audio, it doesn't matter. But if you're on camera, this can very easily start to take up a lot of space. The thing I put in my notes though is that, one, you sound awesome. Like your audio quality sounds so good. Whatever processing you're doing on that microphone, maybe it's just the mic itself, how it sounds on your voice, it sounds really good. So it is kind of one of those cases where if it ain't broke, maybe don't fix it. You have something that's really good already, and maybe spending more money isn't the solution to that. So I don't know that you would actually be happy with something else. Even though the Lewitts are great and I love them, I would worry that you would get one and then feel like, I wish I was using my other microphone. And you could switch between them. You could have the Lewitt for your A-roll stuff and the NT1 for your voiceover stuff, and you can mix them together pretty well. That wouldn't be a problem. But I really think we can work with what you have, and especially if anyone else has this setup or a similar setup, because I use the NT1 on camera a lot. And I've had this same problem because you have this big setup here, and it can be an issue. So what I would say is, if you're doing just the audio only thing, keep this setup. Keep the pop filter, do all that, because that's going to make it easy to get the best sound. When I use this camera or this microphone on camera, I never use the pop filter with it, because getting rid of that slims down the size tremendously. So I usually use it just like this. There you go. And then the problem is it is very prone to plosives. The NT1 will pick up plosives like crazy. So it really comes down to positioning. Instead of having it right in front of you where it's still going to take up space, I usually have mine kind of like this at a 45-degree angle, usually a little lower than me. You could even position it up. A lot of times you'll see if you have a high mic arm, like a tall mic arm, sometimes people will take these microphones, they will actually position them upside down. So you can do that. It doesn't really matter. But it's out of the way and it's at an angle, so that way I'm not talking directly into it. My breath's not going, but its pickup pattern is still picking up my voice from my mouth here, and that works really well. And so usually this is kind of where I will have that mic positioned when I'm using it, and it works great. As you can, if you're watching this, the microphone's kind of down to my, or if you're listening to this, the microphone's kind of down to my side, but my face is still clear. It's not in the way, and the NT1 looks cool. This isn't the one I'm holding here, is not the signature series. I have a blue signature series that's mounted to the wall over there. I love it. So even the default black one, it's a cool looking microphone, but if you got one of the colored ones and it's really, eye-catching and looks great on camera. So that's what I would work with, is position the mic a little bit differently. Take off the pop filter, position it down to the side. You have to be very aware of, where your breath and how you're speaking. But I think then you can work with what you have. And then when you're doing those voiceover only segments, you can pop on the pop filter and get the same audio quality. And it'll be way easier to match that, even if the mic is in slightly different positions for those different parts of what you're making. And that's what I would recommend doing. And I think that would work really, really well. Like I said, there is that little mount, the Rode RM2, if you don't want to use the shock mount at all, but I would only do that if you never touch the surface that the microphone is on. So thanks for the message. I hope that helps. And I would definitely recommend working with the mic that you got because it sounds so good. Up next, we got some comments from last week's episode, which are always fun to go through. So this is from Don Bullock. Tech Eye Hound says, after listening to you on the couples tables this week, I realized I never subscribed to the podcast. How dare you? This was a very helpful episode. While your section on professionals doesn't pertain to me in tech, it did speak to me regarding how I present material on my podcast. It needs to be focused more on being helpful rather than just informative. And that's a great way to put it. I mean, there's nothing, there are places for just being informative, but I feel like a lot of us, when we create stuff and we put it on the internet for other people, what we're doing is we want it to be helpful, right? But if we're just speaking in our jargon and our high level stuff, that's not necessarily helpful. Keeping in mind what level you're explaining. Like when I took an online bass course last year, it's called Beginner to Badass. So you start at the beginner phase. I've been playing guitar since 2001. And, even though I started playing bass more fully in like 2022, I had the basics down, right? The basics of bass. I knew how to hold it. I knew how to use finger style. I knew how to pick, all that kind of stuff. But the first chunk of that course is literally like, this is how you hold your bass. This is how you plug it in. This is where you put the finger here to like strum this string. Like this is what a fret. It's very like, these are the parts of the instrument. Very basic. But with something that has beginner in the title, that's what I would expect. And so even though I already knew those things, I just went through it and, try to pick up any helpful tidbits I could. If that were called like advanced to super advanced, I wouldn't expect that. I would expect to jump in having expectations of like, you probably know major minor scales, this, that, like all like there would be an expectation of proficiency jumping into it. And that's, and that's just what to keep in mind. Like, who is your audience? If you are seeking to be helpful to beginners, you do need to distill. And that to me is just such a skill set, being able to distill complex things into simple explanations. That is a very hard thing to do. And it's something I always admire when people can do it well. And Don says, as for using Keynote, it's an amazing tool for videos that most people who have Macs don't realize they have, much less use, because that was my gear of the week, was Keynote. Not only can it do a lot, and Apple continues to add more capabilities, it's also extremely easy to use. Now I have to go back and listen to the first episode, season 2. Thanks as always. Yeah, that's what I'm using right now. I love Keynote. It's awesome. It's an application I genuinely enjoy using. Like, I like making Keynote presentations. It's fun. Up next, Internet Doggo. This is where we're going to go back to the topic. I'm curious, what are the advantages and disadvantages of side address or end address mics? Also, why do you suppose side address are the standard for condensers? I love that you asked this. It's because I was using the Rode Broadcaster last episode, which is an end address condenser, just like this is. But a lot of condensers, I don't know that I would say most because I don't have the data, but I feel like most of the common ones, they're side address, like the NT1 here, where you talk into the side of it, you don't talk into the end of it. And so when you end, sometimes you find people who have side address microphones and they're talking into the top of it and it doesn't sound good. And sometimes then if you have people who are used to condensers, you find them talking into the side of end address microphones. which also doesn't sound good, especially on the Rode broadcaster that I was using last time. It looks kind of like you could talk into the side of it. So it's not something, this one makes sense. Like you talk into the end of it. I think anyone would do that. That one was a little less clear. So I thought that, you know what, that's a really good question that I don't actually know the answer to. So I had to do a little bit of digging online into some like websites and blogs from professionals. This is where I was like, I want a professional resource. I don't want guessing. I don't want hypothetical stuff. I want someone who knows the answer to give me the answer. And that's where it's like, I want the professional resource. So this is a time where that professional input really, really, really helps. So in general, what I've learned is from side address to end address, there's really no difference in sound for the most part. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess if I took this capsule from this microphone and somehow mounted in the side, in general, it would sound pretty much the same. Side address microphones typically do allow for larger capsules, so it's a little easier to have a large capsule facing that way rather than having to make the mic bigger in diameter. You can just make it, you know, I don't know. I think in terms of designing the microphone, it helps. The biggest difference, though, that I found was pickup patterns. Having these side address microphones makes it easier to allow for different pickup patterns. So if you want something that not just, you know, has a cardioid pattern that picks up what's in front of it, but maybe you want a figure 8 pattern that does in front and behind, or you want an omnidirectional pickup pattern, that side address makes that significantly easier and sound better than trying to do that through an end address microphone. And I was like, oh, that makes sense right there. So side versus end address, I think pickup pattern is probably the biggest thing. And then there was also some discussion on working with different gear. So what you're trying to mic up, are you trying to mic up a person? Are you trying to mic up a drum set, a choir, an amplifier, all that kind of stuff? Like certain designs, end address, side address, based on the mounts that you have and the stuff that you're trying to do, some of them just work better than others. So in general, like a professional recording studio will probably have a variety of microphones, end address and side address, and then we'll use them for different things, for different reasons. And those are some of the answers to that. That was an interesting question, and I was excited that I was able to, you know, rely on professional resources for that. Speaking of the Rode Broadcaster, next comments from Audio Hotline, who gave me the Rode Broadcaster. Also, I need to send a huge congrats because Audio Hotline had a baby this week. Audio Hotline's wife had a baby this week. I was saying he now owns a baby. That's not it. But congratulations. That is super exciting. He's a nice Mike. Also, great episode. I do think the enthusiast route is best to take. I've had a hard time bridging the gap between pro and enthusiast, which seems weird, but it's a bit of a struggle with every video, and I'm trying to work it out, though. And that's, if you watch Bronson on Audio Hotline, I think he does a great job of bridging the gap between pro and enthusiast. But you know, like, he wants people to have the best info. And so I think I am more willing, and this is why I rely on the fact that there are other YouTubers out there. I think I'm more willing to leave things out, to sort of simplify stuff to the point where, like, if you really dive into this, then you're going to find, okay, here's the next level. And sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't, but I am always worried about overwhelming people. And I do that because I know I can make a simple video about an audio thing that kind of gets people in the door, gets them feeling comfortable with it, gets them asking, you know, as long as you get someone to ask questions, like, I can overload everyone with, like, info about lens aperture and the exposure triangle and all that. It's not going to really mean anything until you just sort of help someone go like, hey, you want to take a photo that has a blurry background? And then they really like that. And now suddenly they're like, wait, how do I do that again? Now they're suddenly asking questions about what is exposure? What's ISO? What's aperture? How does that work? And then once you've got someone to ask their own questions, everything else is easy. Then you've won. And that's where I know, like, if I can do that, if I can bring people in, give them the basics, get them to ask questions, then I know there are the people out there like Audio Hotline, Curtis Judd, in the audio world, where it's like you can go down the technical rabbit hole. But I feel like Bronson his approach is so down to earth that even when he gets into technical info, because he wants you to have the technical info and wants you to have the full story, it never ever feels like you're being talked down to. It really feels like you're being shown, guided. It really genuinely feels like you're just hanging out with a friend who's just like showing you something and nerding out about it. So I think you do a great job of that, and that's pretty awesome. Level Up with Mike Newman says, Thank you for the video. I have been really struggling with my channel. I feel like the harder I try to keep my videos fun, simple, and funny, I get killed with comments from pros. I seem to get a lot of flack about my presentation, my lack of specs, even how I use my own gear. Are you me, Mike? Are you me? Even how I use my own gear in my own videos via emails and Facebook Messenger. So I caught myself trying to change my style from trying out mics for enthusiasts to making videos to get their approval. I feel this to my core. And well, let's finish. I get no joy from that. It has brought me to a place where I was contemplating just hanging it all up. To hear this from you has changed my outlook, and I'm going to push through the struggle. I'm so happy to hear that, Mike. Not the bad part, but the push through part. Because I feel that, like, I feel that so much. If you're trying to, like, all the thoughts, right? Let's look at the Rodecaster, right? The Rodecaster Pro. It has Pro in the name, so right there, it's setting itself up for a little bit of criticism. The Rodecaster Pro is something that can be used in professional environments. Yes. It's really more of a prosumer device. And I think that's where it lines up. And so that's one of those things where I feel like someone who's a pro who has all that experience, they can find that and they can know how to use it. They can know how to contextualize it in their workflow. And that's cool. I feel like a pro, somebody at that level would also know, like, oh, this just isn't for me, so I'm just not going to worry about it. The weird thing is when the person comes in and then has to tell you all the reasons why you're wrong, this thing sucks, this is bad. And then, yes, then you might find yourself going like, okay, when I make this, like, how do I please that person? How do I not get any more of those comments? Was that person didn't need the info, right? Like, they know what the thing is already. They know so much about it. They know why it doesn't work for them. They don't need your video. That's not who it's for. It's for the person who's like, like the mystery mic. I'm really looking forward to that video coming out, the little 2.4 gigahertz mystery mic video I mentioned, because I can't help but feel like there's going to be professionals in the comments telling me how that mic sucks. And I can hear it. I can hear that it does not sound as good as the other microphone. But I tried to be very clear in that video of like, who is this for? Who is a $40 dual transmitter wireless microphone for? It's not for professionals. It's for, and I even say, like, get the Hollyland if you want something relatively affordable that sounds way better. But if you're somebody who would never consider spending over $100 on a microphone, and you do a lot of filming just with your phone, and you just want a little bit better sound, you just want to be able to pin a microphone to yourself, to someone else to make some videos or do whatever, $40 is going to get you better sound. Not the best sound, but better sound. And that is who that is for. That actually has a place, that has a purpose. And so that's the person that's going to be helped by that, going, oh my gosh, there's resources. Or it could also help that person by going, oh, that's what the $40 one sounds like. That's what the $125 one sounds like. That seems like a big price difference, but the features and the sound really do seem a lot better. So maybe I'll go with the $125 one. Like, that's actually going to help the person versus the person who is never going to buy it anyway. I just feel you to my core with this comment. I'm glad that by sharing that, I let you know that you're not alone in feeling that way. I'm glad you could let me know, and we can all not be alone together. We can all be alone together. Oh, that was the last comment. All right. See? That's why I had to put up the end frame there. I didn't realize that was at the end. So thank you to everyone who sent comments. If you want to, again, you can go to HiMyNameIsTom.com, leave voice messages. You can tap the fan mail thing if you're listening to the audio version right at the top of the show notes. You can send a message directly to the show, or you can always email tom@enthusiasmproject.com. Definitely recommend you do that, because next week is episode 5. So as is tradition, that is going to be the Q&A episode of the season. Not that you can't ask Q's any episode, but that where the whole episode is dedicated just to questions and answers. That'll be fun because I haven't done that in video format yet. So if you have any questions, however you want to send them, text, voice, video, feel free to send them my way and I'll include them in next week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something out of it. Have a safe, happy, healthy week, and I'll see you next time.